Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Castello, board-certified family practice with CastelloWellness.com, and I'm going to do the unthinkable today. I'm going to defend big pharma and the modern pharmaceutical companies. Before I'm going to do that, I'm going to give you a quick history lesson. So let's go back to 1900. This is pre-big pharma. Average life expectancy in the United States was about 48 years of age. For the prior millennium before that, Jesus' time, ancient Egyptian time, we know from historical records that life expectancy was probably age 40. So in 2,000 or 3,000 years' time, we increased life expectancy by about 8 years, and this is probably primarily because of modern plumbing and clean water and clean food supplies. Let's go a few years ahead to 1918, the Spanish flu epidemic, which infected a third of the world's population and killed between 50 and 100 million people worldwide, died from Spanish flu. This was pre-modern pharma flu vaccine. This is pre-flu medications. This is pre-antibiotics. 50 to 100 million people died. If you want to extrapolate that to today, with the world population over 6 billion, that's 360 million deaths if we didn't have flu medications and flu vaccines and had a similar flu epidemic. If you want to put that on a local term, my child's grade school, figuring half the people that died of influenza were children, half were young adults, that would be in one school, 10 children dying in one flu season. Multiply that times the junior high school and the high school and every school in the United States and tell me if that's an acceptable death rate from influenza in one flu season. It's unacceptable. Get your flu shot, take flu medications if you get sick. Let's go a few years ahead to 1930, and I'm going to say 1930 is similar technology to today. We had electricity, we had modern transportation, we had refrigeration. We did not have significant modern pharma at that point. Insulin was developed shortly before this and cured diabetes in children, but we really hadn't had modern medication at that point. Average life expectancy in 1930 was 59 years of age. So modern technology brought us up an additional 11 years. This was probably a combination of technology, not dying in mining accidents, and having some basic creature comforts. Penicillin was developed in the early 1930s, and for the first time, kids didn't die of strep infections. 90% of children did not die when they got meningitis. The remaining 10% weren't permanently injured with brain damage, retardation, and deafness from meningitis. When you got an ear infection, it didn't spread to the bones, and you didn't have to have your skull bones chiseled away to rid you of the infection from modern pharma, penicillin invention, and future antibiotics that followed. The early 1950s saw the polio vaccine and smallpox vaccine, and we had worldwide eradication of both of those illnesses. In the mid-1950s, polio was rampant and affecting about 40,000 Americans a year. Kids were dying from that. Kids were spending up to a year in an iron lung because they had no muscle strength at all to breathe. Those that survived polio spent their lifetime in a wheelchair, crippled from the disease. Jonas Salk and Leaderly Laboratory developed the vaccine with help from others for polio and eradicated the illness. Since that time, we have medications that treat heart disease and diabetes and cholesterol and MS and all kinds of things that we had zero treatment for, and you died from these diseases prior to modern pharma. Currently, it takes between $1.3 and $1.7 billion to bring a new drug to market. That's discovering the drug, developing the drug, testing the drug, getting FDA approval for the drug, and bringing it to market. This $1.3 billion was at the expense of a privately owned company who developed a drug at their risk and for their profit. Put that on local terms again, to recoup a $1.3 billion investment at a pill that cost you $10 a day, $300 a month, you would have to sell 356,000 years of that medication to break even with the medicine. Double that to 700,000 years of medication sales to make enough money to bring your next drug to market. That's break even. You made $0 for yourself. You made $0 for your stockholder. You have to make a profit if you're a company and going to stay in business. You want to give that to the government. Look at Solyndra, how well that did. The government funded solar panel research and the company went out of business. You cannot give development of medications and vaccines to the government. They're horribly inefficient. If you want to, again, continue to argue that we make too much money in big pharma, profit margin in big pharma is between 12 and 15%. If you want to compare this to Heinz ketchup, and I like to make fun of Heinz ketchup because John Kerry is married to Teresa Heinz Kerry, the ketchup mogul, their profit margin is 35%. It's triple big pharma, and in fact, food manufacturing in general makes between 35 and 37% profit margin. You cannot argue that medications are essential and they can't cost money, but then say food can be marked up with a 35% profit margin, and that's fair. Be careful what you wish for. Prior to antibiotics, kids died every day from illnesses that you take for granted. Before modern vaccination, kids died from influenza, they died from polio, they died from whooping cough, they had congenital rubella syndrome, which was a crippling birth defect from a simple viral infection that is now completely treatable with vaccinations. You had a heart attack. If you didn't die from the heart attack, treatment was 6 weeks of bed rest. You laid in bed and recuperated, and then were what was called a cardiac cripple. So you were too short of breath to walk to the mailbox. We don't use that term anymore because we don't have cardiac cripples because of modern medication. If you had an ulcer prior to Pepcid and Zantac and Prilosec and Nexium, you drank cream for 3 weeks or 6 weeks to try and treat your ulcer. If it didn't work, you had part of your stomach surgically removed to take the ulcer portion out. These are barbaric treatments for what we now consider basic, simple diseases and basic, simple medications that we take for granted. If you cripple the pharmaceutical injury, if you limit the cost of a drug to the point where the pharmaceutical company cannot make money, they're going to go out of business, and we're not going to have any new innovation. We're not going to have new medications. The latest treatments will not become available, and we're going to be stuck today. You may die, your child may die from a disease that would be preventable in the future if we do not have new medications. So before you blame modern pharma, before you complain that your prescription is too expensive, why don't you go back and think about living in 1900 when you had no medical therapies at all? Off target very slightly for the vaccine freaks out there who say vaccines cause autism and vaccines are going to kill you. I'd like you to watch your 2-year-old die from pertussis infection, which is a bad cold. If you have your vaccination, if you're unvaccinated, you're going to die. I'd like to see people that have a baby born with congenital rubella syndrome complain that when they didn't take their vaccines and they got rubella when they're pregnant. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. Dr. Greg Castello, thank you.